So for this next episode, I thought it'd be really good to talk about should you get involved in a clinical drug trial if you are a standard patient without illness or someone who is suffering from a disease. So there's lots of information I could go into, but I will try and keep it general for now. So a little bit of backstory. When I was early days of uni, I didn't have a lot of cash, and there was an opportunity for me to go into a drug trial. So the situation was our family knew, or they were friends with a nurse, and the nurse was involved in clinical research. So they told me about the trial, and basically what it entailed was spending 2 weeks in hospital. So you're not able to leave the hospital. You've got some regular blood tests, and you will go on an experimental medication. At the time I was healthy, so this is the early stage of the testing where they just need healthy volunteers to look for general side effects and for basically just to determine that the drug is safe. Now, at the time I told my friends about it. I said, look, we can take 2 weeks off, it's uni break, it's summer break. We've got nothing else really going on except our usual part-time jobs, casual jobs that we had. So we really strongly considered it. But in the end, I decided that I wouldn't go into the trial. It was just personal reasons. For me, I was dating someone at the time, so the thought of spending 2 weeks in isolation in a hospital didn't really excite me. I only had a casual job at the time, so I could have, just not taken shifts at that job, but I decided not to. And the other factor was that it would have paid really nicely. So for 2 weeks in hospital, you would have been paid about $4,000 for that clinical trial. But something to keep in mind is that not all clinical trials are paid. A lot are unpaid, especially if you are ill with the disease. Generally you're volunteering to be on an experimental medication that could improve, could even save your life. So I decided not to go into that clinical trial, but the clinical trial still recruited enough patients, healthy people, to go ahead. And to the best of my knowledge, all of those people, they lived, they were fine, I guess. The side effects of the medication, when I looked at it later, most commonly was skin issues, dermatological issues, rash, nausea, fatigue, headache. These are the common side effects that we'll get with any drug, especially experimental drugs. And so, did I regret it? Yeah, kind of. I think that money would have been really helpful for me at the time, when that would have been equivalent to about 3 months working in my casual job, and I could have earned that in 2 weeks just for sitting around playing video games in a hospital. So that's why I thought it'd be a really good idea to do this video. So first thing I want to cover is really briefly, the phases of a clinical trial. So before they're even tested in humans, they have this phase called preclinical drug testing. That involves testing the drug on cell assays, in vitro, and also animal testing, which will go through many phases. I don't want to go into too much detail on the animal testing, it depresses me, but basically this is to determine, as close as they can approximate, a human effective dose for having a disease, and also the safe dose without toxicities. Companies that develop medicines, they have to go to an ethics committee to get the clinical trial approved. So most, if not all, of the companies that I know will try and minimally reduce how many animals are used in drug testing. So yeah, that's another ethical debate on whether we should use animals in the future. I think there's possibility to remove animals from testing for some drugs as they're developing organs on chips, which might be even another video. So it does animal testing, and then it goes to humans. The human testing has 4 phases. The first phase is primarily to determine the safety of the drug. This is the phase when they recruit healthy volunteers. Now, I'll include a few links below to sources, websites, or just how you can search for if you want to be involved in a drug trial as a healthy volunteer. It could also be helpful to know someone who works in healthcare to be involved in these. The pros is often you will be paid. You are doing an amazing benefit for healthcare discovery because you're being involved in a healthy volunteer, but later the drug will be used in an unhealthy volunteer, which means that potentially you could be part of the journey of improving or saving people's lives. So that's one phase. The cons is this is the first time this will be used in humans. So up to the point that they're going to either give you an oral therapy to take or inject you with something, they haven't tested in humans. So it is high risk. You can look at the animal studies to see the closest approximate, which would be the safety or, adverse events, side effects, as they're often called in general terms, that primates might have. And they can be similar, but they can be completely different. And unexpected things can happen. There's many case scenarios where this has happened. But nowadays, the occasions where this occur are very rare. So that's phase 1. The second phase is to determine the optimal dose of a drug, and it's also to determine, again, safety. And in a small pool of patients, is the drug effective for the disease? So at this point, they will take people who are sick or ill, who are suffering with the disease, whether it be a specific type of cancer, whether it could be depression, a mental health illness, something wrong with any one of their organs, blood pressure medication, all sorts. So this is done for every single phase, and this phase has to be successful before the drug will continue. And then comes the biggest phase, which is phase 3. This will often take multiple hundreds, if not multiple thousands of patients with a disease to determine over a large cohort, is this drug effective versus the standard or placebo or the best available therapy, or BAT, as is often called in clinical trial world. So in this phase, if you are involved, you will usually be recruited by a healthcare practitioner, a doctor who's involved in the trial, at a hospital site where they're actively looking for patients that they can recruit because they have been set up as a clinical trial site. Usually. Nowadays we are moving to more of a digital way of doing clinical trials, so sometimes you don't need to be in front of a doctor, or that is supposedly the way the future might work, using artificial intelligence. So this phase often goes for multiple years where you will be taking the experimental medication. But keep in mind at this stage it's been tested on cells, animals, and usually it's been tested on animals in 2 separate studies, and they are quite confident where they will just test a single dose against standard therapy. They used to design trials so that 50% of patients were on placebo or the best current therapy and 50% were on an alternate therapy, but they tend to design trials now where ethics committees prefer it to be that majority of patients are taking the new medicine and minority of patients, maybe a third, are taking the previous best available therapy. So what's the risk here? The risk is that you're not sure which one you're taking. In 90% plus of these drug trials, it's considered double blind. So double blind means that you, as a participant, have no idea what drug you're on, and the investigator also has no idea what drug they've given you. Their role is to ensure you take the drug appropriately. They'll monitor any side effects you might get, and they're monitoring to see if the drug is effective. And you as a patient have the onus to show up to your regular visits, take the medication as prescribed, and also be honest and aware of any side effects you might be experiencing, and always report these to the clinician, to the nurse, whoever's involved. So the pros here is that you will once again be part of a huge trial in clinical research, so you'll be aiding the medical discovery. There's a chance that you will have to come in on a con side, there's a chance that you'll have to come in for extra visits, but you'll still be taking what you would have been taking had this drug trial not existed. So you're just coming in for extra visits for no personal benefit. But on the flip side is you have at least a 50% chance that you will be on a therapy that may or may not be better. In most trials, these have been carefully calculated, and in majority of cases, a high majority of cases, the experimental drug is more effective than the placebo drug or the best available therapy. The odds are in your favor by entering the trial that whichever illness you have, you will be on a superior therapy. So that part's the question, actually. So that brings us to our next phase of clinical trial, which is phase 4. This happens after the phase 3 trial is completed. Drugs out there in the marketplace, people can take it, they can pick it up from their pharmacy or a hospital, and they can use it to be effective for the disease. The phase 4 is, once it's out there in the marketplace, what other things do we want to know? We basically want to survey the way the drug has been used in a global patient cohort. So in the hundreds of thousands, millions of patients, are there any ultra rare side effects that didn't show up in the phase 3 clinical trials or earlier trials? And is there other things we need to know about this drug, such as has there been an interaction with another medication that they weren't aware of, but now it's appearing? So phase 4 is basically assessing how it's going in the marketplace. So after those 4 trials, the big question to ask is, would I be involved in a clinical trial if I was ill with the disease? Or even not ill with the disease? Well, now I'm very close to clinical trial space, so I wouldn't enroll myself as a healthy volunteer, although I do think it is a very good situation for those with either low-paying jobs, if they are out of work, if they're potentially a university student and trying to get extra funds and they're committed to helping healthcare research, but it may be a very big time commitment. But if I was unhealthy, would I be involved in a clinical trial if one came up to me? In my honest opinion, knowing what I know, 99% of the time, yes, I would. There's certain cases where almost without a doubt I would. If I had cancer and there was a drug trial that appeared, knowing how quick these work and knowing how rapidly cancer oncology drugs are developed, the odds that you will be on a medication that can extend your life is in your favor. You may experience some poor toxicities, but if you're going through chemotherapy anyway, you might have them as well. So with a very severe illness, would I go on experimental medication? Yes, absolutely I would. If my disease wasn't as severe, personally, I would look at the background research, but still, majority of the time, I would. My bias could be that I work in healthcare, I want to improve healthcare, and I want more drugs and medicines to be available to people, so that may affect my decision. But hopefully, that's given you a little bit of information about drug trials and how they work, and my honest review of should you get involved in a drug trial. Feel free to comment below if you have been involved in a trial. Do not mention the name of company or drug. If you had a good experience, would you recommend it? Would you not recommend it based on your experience? And yeah, I hope you found this video helpful, and I will see you next time.